Well, welcome everybody to today's discussion about growth mindsets. My name is Dave Bazanko, and I'm going to be your host throughout this conversation today. First of all, to everybody that's going to be joining the conversation, I'm so grateful that you've decided to spend your time with me for the next half hour talking about growth mindsets. And if you have any questions for me during the conversation, what I'm going to encourage you to do is to write down those questions in the chat box so that they're keyed up and ready to go when we start the Q&A session of the discussion. So what I would encourage you to do right now, if you do have any questions about growth mindsets that you're currently thinking about, just test out the chat box feature, put in whatever questions that you have, and I will be more than happy to answer those as soon as we get to the question and answering session. So with that in mind, the presentation is going to be about 15 minutes long, and then we're going to get into the Q&A. And what I can tell you right now is that I find myself on camera really distracting, so I'm going to turn my video off while I go through the presentation, and then I'll turn it back on again once we get into the Q&A session. So to get things started, what I'd like to do is start off the conversation by talking about Carol Dweck and the Neuro Leadership Institute and their theory about the definition of growth mindsets. One of their biggest challenges is helping people define the difference between fixed and growth mindsets. But they do a lot of research based in the academic setting. So what I'd like to do today is further that distinction between academic and the real world. So in the academic setting, people with fixed mindsets believe that their intelligence or talent is simply a fixed trait. They spend a lot of their time documenting their intelligence or talent instead of developing it. In the real world, people with fixed mindsets tend to go to work and document their time to validate their paycheck, rather than trying to continuously improve the work that they do. So fixed mindsets can cause some serious problems for companies. And here's why. This is actually a picture of the inside of the Dana Frame plant in Thorold, Ontario, which closed about 10 years ago. This plant used to be filled with an assembly line and thousands of people making truck frames. Now, back in my 30s, I did the unthinkable as a business graduate, and I worked at this factory as a machine operator for 8 years. It just wasn't in the plans for me to be a machine operator. I was going to be a businessman. And every day I went to work at the plant, it felt like I was going to jail, which ironically enough, there was a jail located right across the street from the factory. And from the outdoor lunch tables at work, I could literally see the barbed wire from the prison fence. So I can assure you that the irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. But this picture was taken long after the plant closed, and the production line had been removed, and it's highly symbolic of what I think the real problem was. And that is, you see, during the good times, most people, most workers had a fixed mindset with a worldview that the business would never close. Their worldview was that the company had loads of money, that the company's shareholders were greedy, and that they were not to be trusted. Their mantra was just do your job, make quality parts, and let the union fight for you. This was the daily mantra that they could clearly see from this picture. I mean, as you look at this picture, this was in the center of the plant, and every day we were reminded quality was our future. And people believed it, you know. They believed that if they just did their job, they were no better or worse than anybody else, fly under the radar, everything would work out okay in the end. Their fixed mindsets and their worldview told them the doors would never close. And I'll tell you, I'm pretty sure the last horse and buggy whip company made a quality product too, but quality wasn't the issue. Industry disruption was the real problem. But a few people at the plant did have growth mindsets. Yes, they did work for a paycheck, but they also wanted to learn and grow too. And I was one of those people. I wanted to learn about factory life so that I could relate more to others in my family who worked at the factory. I took advantage of the free college courses that the company paid for to improve my worldview of the automotive industry so that I could see the writing on the wall. I did more than I had to as a machine operator by writing database programs to improve operational efficiency for the equipment I was using, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I didn't like the norm and I didn't like the status quo. To me, that was just boring and I wanted to be better. I've always had this sort of intrinsic growth mindset that's always been part of sort of who I am. Now, The factory was facing some real serious problems. About 12 years ago, 2 years after I had voluntarily left the factory at 40 with my house paid for, the company experienced some massive disruption going through the automotive supply chain industry. Because the union members had fixed mindsets, no one believed the plant would close, so they voted not to concede on any of their union demands. Because of this disconnect between the employees' worldview and the company's worldview, the doors did indeed close and thousands of people lost their jobs. Now, what people failed to realize is, in business and in life, you're either playing a finite game or an infinite game. People with fixed mindsets play a finite game with their heads down and prepared to fight if they have to. But people with growth mindsets pick their heads up so that they can see what's happening all around them, so they don't have to fight. They'll miss the fight altogether. It's with that broader perspective, people with growth mindsets can appreciate everyone else's worldview, and they can make more informed choices and make small improvements every day that help them to keep playing the infinite game. So the main idea that I want to share with you today is that growth mindsets are a competitive advantage, both in business and in life. In the age of disruption, now more than ever, we need to help each other learn how to move from fixed to growth mindsets. And we can all learn from each other. We all have our own unique perspective. And what we need to know is that people with growth mindsets in every aspect of business and personal life improves. Now, because I chose to keep my head up and continue to learn, I'm currently enjoying opportunities today that others simply don't get to experience. I mean, we all have the capacity to experience more health, more happiness, and more success in life. But the curious question is, why is there such a disconnect between what we actually know and what we actually do? As you can see from this recent photo from the GM plant in Oshawa, there's a lot of people right now with fixed mindsets, and they don't know what they're going to do. And I think it's our job and our opportunity as growth mindset leaders to help people like this. And we can see this type of fixed mindset disconnect all around us. I mean, here's an example of 3 common real-world fixed mind disconnects. So for example, savings. What we know is that 57% of adults across North America have less than $1,000 in their savings account and aren't properly saving for their retirement. We also know that with food, 75% of people in North America don't eat enough fruits and vegetables every day. And we also know that 97% of people don't exercise every day. I mean, these are things that we know we should be doing, but why aren't most people doing them? And I think the million-dollar question, it is the million-dollar question, why are people not doing them? But I think the real answer might be found by asking a slightly different question. A better question that we can ask is, how do we change the cultural norm? So in this case, what I'd like to do is get people to move from a fixed to a growth mindset as a daily practice. But what the law of diffusion of innovation tells us is that you have to be able to move people from, you have to be able to, you can't just jump right in and influence everybody all together. What it tells us is you have to go through all 5 levels of you have to go through all 5 levels of the, I lost my train of thought. You have to go through all 5 levels of influence, thank you, before you can get on to mass exception of the cultural norm. So let me give an example of what that looks like. There we go. So let's imagine for a second that you're trying to influence the cynical majority. It's kind of like putting an oxygen mask on a child. We're all influenced by people we know and trust, but if I tell a child who's a complete or relative stranger to me to put on an oxygen mask, and I just tell them to breathe normal, who am I kidding? That kid's never going to listen to me, and they're just going to freak out. But if their mother, one of their closest influencers, demonstrates through her own quiet actions that this change is the way we're going to be breathing. It is a little bit different. It might be scary, but it's necessary for our survival, and it will work. They're more likely to conform because she's living proof, and they know and trust her more than they would ever trust you or me. It's just common sense. So it might seem counterintuitive, but the way that you develop a growth mindset culture across an entire organization is not to focus on everyone, just focus on your key influencers, the early adapters to your growth mindset movement. And these early adapters are the people who are already believing what you believe. These are people who already open their minds to change, and they just need a little bit of guidance. And they can be anybody. I mean, leadership is not a position of authority, it's a choice. And leaders choose to lead not because they have to, but because they want to. And that's when leaders start to influence people around them, when followers start to see tangible proof that the development of positive new behaviors and new habits work. So just like in the oxygen mask example, followers need to see proof from someone they know and trust before they're going to believe that change will actually work. So, we really do become the sum of the 5 people we spend the most time with. And when you think about remembering, the law of diffusion of innovation that we just talked about, these levels exist in every group of 5 or more peoples. So our leaders, those influencers, they just have to be consistent in their behavior with their group of 5 people. They don't have to impact the entire company for the culture to spread. They just have to help the person to the left of them and the person to the right of them be 1% better every day. And there are influencers at every level. They just need time and support to develop. Now the question is, or the problem is, we don't know how long that time is going to take to influence people. When you scare people into radical thinking, which I've experienced, they usually get quietly pissed off and then find a new friend group of people to hang out with. And I've been influencing people for about a decade now, and it's still a work in progress for everyone, including me. I mean, that's what growth is. It's about constant trial, error, and improvement. Now, another analogy might be it's kind of like losing 10 pounds. It's going to take longer than a month, but it should take less than a couple of years, but nobody really knows how long it's actually going to take. There's just too many variables. So the best idea that I can share with you today is to make growth mindsets a competitive advantage for your organization is to focus on and reward influencers who consistently display the desired growth mindset behavior, whatever that looks like for your company. And those are your influencers. It will take time, but over time, influencers can make change happen. So part of my journey in moving from a fixed to a growth mindset was to stop measuring success as happiness. And I believe that's an extremely important distinction to make. See, when you measure success as happiness, all you do is push happiness over the cognitive horizon, and your brain never really gets to feel happy. Now, why might that be? Well, it's because success is just a moment in time. It's just momentary pleasure. But true health and happiness can and should last a lifetime. So that mindset change took 50 years for me to finally figure out, because it goes against our cultural norm of when I'm successful, then I'll be happy. When I successfully crossed my first Ironman finish line on the bottom left there, I thought I would finally be happy. What I experienced was momentary pleasure for about 3 seconds until I turned around and saw my time. I immediately measured myself against everyone else and changed my idea of what success looked like in an instant. And that pushed success farther away. Remember, people with fixed mindsets spend their time measuring themselves against other people. So, it would take me 2 more Ironmans for me to finally discover and figure out the growth mindset definition of happiness. So today, I surround myself with people who believe what I believe, and that is that happiness is the joy you feel while striving for your full potential every day. So that definition allows me to feel happy every day as I strive and reach my full potential, not just when I'm crossing a finish line. I mean, if you think about it, it kind of makes sense, but again, it goes against our cultural norm. So you might be asking yourself, what is your next step? If you want to develop a growth mindset culture at your organization, what is your next step? What do you have to do? Well, in my experience, growth comes from your ability to appreciate other people's worldview, okay? That new perspective will help you define your vision for the future, which is a place you absolutely believe in, but you might not ever get to see, and that's okay. Perspective shows you the action steps that you need to take to bring you one step closer to your vision. And perspective also shows you the limiters in your cultural norms that are likely going to hold you back. So with that perspective about growth mindsets, I'm going to open up the conversation, and I'd like to talk to you folks about your perspective on growth mindset and what that means to you. So to do that, let me just open up my video again. There I am. So I've got a few people here, and let me just stop my screen share for 1 second. And I'm going to get into a bigger audience, and I'm going to have a look at the chat. And let's see if anybody has dropped in a chat. Nobody has given me a question yet. All right, so let's just open it up to the group conversation. If you'd like to take your microphone off and join in the conversation, that would be great. If you'd like to chat me a question, I've got the chat window open. But, you know, I think the reason for wanting to have this discussion today is because as I talk to people in the corporate world and the HR world, there's a lot of people talking about growth mindsets. There's a lot of people talking about, you know, Carol Dweck and her research and the work that she's doing. And, you know, what I'm seeing is it's taken over a decade for me to influence my 5 people. And, you know, helping people understand that these things take time, but there are actual tangible steps that you can take to get to you where you want to go. Once you sort of appreciate that, it actually does improve. So here, okay, so what are the first few concrete steps you recommend? So thank you, Stephanie, for that. With any organization, what I recommend doing first of all is understanding your corporate vision as to, so understand your why. Why is it that you want to make change in the first place? That's number 1. Number 2 is create a vision for the organization and create a vision for yourself that aligns with the organization, so that when you get up to do work every day, it's meaningful and it's powerful and it's taking you to that place that you may never get to, but you want to strive to be your best at getting to every day. So the first step is actually going through a why discovery and finding out what it is from your past that has made you the person that you are, that gives you the drive that you have. And then from there, create a vision that's going to work with both you and your organization. Then define what happiness looks like, because there's nothing worse than going to work every day in an environment where people aren't happy. We know from science and from Sean Akers' research on the happiness advantage, we know that every business metric goes up when you're working from a place of happiness and when you're moving from neutral and stress to a positive attitude. So there are 7 steps that Sean shares, and that I mean, if we have more time, I can do that. But there are 7 steps that Sean shares with folks when he does his corporate workshops that helps you do 7 simple things like be more grateful, send off a positive email to 1 person a day, record a positive experience so that you relive that positive experience in your brain. There's a lot of analogies or similarities between the training that I do as an Ironman triathlete and the way that I live my life now. And what I'm doing is I'm actually training my brain every day to be positive. Because if we don't keep that top of mind, we'll just drift whichever way our brain wants us to go, depending on whatever hot button or hot issues is happening. But I use, and all of you can go to my website and get this for free, I use a growth mindset journal. And I track every day all those things that are important to me, so that I make sure they're top of mind. I make sure that there are steps that I take every day that are going to help me realize my future vision, and I record those. And those are the things that I record in my journal, not, you know, what do I have to do for this meeting or that meeting. It's about what do I have to do today to take me 1 step closer to realizing my vision. So once I figure out my why and my vision, and I understand what's going to make me happy every day, then I start looking at, okay, what are the 1% improvements that I can make to my life? The easy things that are going to make a difference, that are going to add up at the end of the day. So I look at the 1%, the aggregate of 1% that can actually add up for me and what those look like. Then I look at a critical mistake analysis. So I talked in the presentation about limiters. A limiter is something that stands between you and your vision. And sometimes it can be some bad habits that we have. Things like emotional eating. Right now, when the Toronto Maple Leafs play hockey, I've got this huge bad habit of just emotionally eating, and it's really hard. But that's a limiter that's stopping me from getting to where I want to go. So I've got a strategy that I put in place. Rather than having chips or other things available to munch on while I'm watching the hockey game, I have grapes, because it's something that I can munch on and sort of takes care of that need to be chewing on something emotionally, but it's not really putting bad things into my system. So I come up with strategies that are going to help me make those 1% aggregate gains in my life. And then again, critical mistake analysis is really something that I think everybody should look at. We all make mistakes. There's none of us that are perfect, but some mistakes matter more than others, and some mistakes are drastically taking us off on a different path from where we want to be going. So just being aware of what those mistakes are, being conscious of them, and having a strategy to navigate through those mistakes is hugely important. And then the last part of it is just the habits that we create for ourselves every day. Those habits are what are going to take us one step forward. And there's a lot of great work about habits. I used to use these things called visual cues, visual triggers, and I would put something in front of me that, whether it be a t-shirt that said, "Today I win," which was, if you know anything about my backstory, that's my mantra. And that's what got me running. That's what got me started 12 years ago. Every day I would wake up and I would look at this t-shirt on the floor that says, "Today I win." And it was my mindset of, I don't have to worry about a year from now or 10 years from now or 20 years from now. I've got to worry about today. And if I'm 1% better today than I was yesterday, then tomorrow will take care of itself. So Stephanie, hopefully that sort of answered your question. I have this sort of five-step approach to the action steps that I share with people. You can definitely get more information from my website if you want about how I share that information. I've got free videos there, free resources. I also do workshops if you're interested in joining me for one of those, where we go really in depth and do some pretty serious workshop material to help people walk away with a serious action plan that they can put into motion. So Jennifer has written me a message here. So what surprised you as you were learning about growth mindsets? What stood out? For me, I'm going to tell you, the biggest thing for me was the idea that we're on this spectrum, that at any point in time, we can either have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset perspective, and we really have to be conscious of where we are. So for me, when I was first starting on this journey 12 years ago of health and happiness and wellness, the whole thing was based on a heart scare that I had and being overweight and a bunch of, the doctor basically gave me, after I got rushed to the ER, the doctor gave me two choices. He said, "Dave, you can either go on heart and cholesterol medication for the rest of your life, or you can lose some weight and get in shape." Well, thanks, great advice. How do I do that? And so I spent the next 3 years kind of like Forrest Gump. I actually ran for 3 years in a row. I had no idea what I was doing. It just seemed like the right thing to do, trying to make my heart stronger. And what was amazing to me was, in the back of my mind, I wanted to feel happy. We all want more health and happiness in my life, but I didn't feel happy. Even though I had this control over one part of my life, my weight was adjusting, my health was getting better, my heart was getting stronger, my brain was getting stronger, but I just wasn't happy. And when I crossed that first Ironman finish line, I distinctly remember turning around and looking at that number and going, "Really? 14 hours? Really? I could do better than that." And I immediately pushed happiness away. And people say to me, "But you just did an Ironman." I'm like, "Yeah, but I didn't do it the way I wanted to." And it took me really literally 4 more years until I actually, I read Sean Akers' book on happiness, The Happiness Advantage. But I saw an interview that he did at Google. And he gave that definition, where happiness is the joy you feel while striving for your full potential every day. And it was like, it was like a miracle. All of a sudden, everything made sense. And I had to stop focusing on the things I couldn't control, the things that were totally, out of my reach, and say, okay, if I have a plan, and if I have visibility of my truth every day, if I know what I'm eating, if I know how I'm training for work, if I know how I'm training for my own personal health, if I'm constantly taking steps every day to improve myself, I'm on the right track, and I should celebrate that. In sales, which is where my background comes from, we celebrate all these little things when we learn a little new piece of intel on a customer. We celebrate that because we know we're one step closer to maybe one day making either a friend or a customer. So in my big aha moment came when I heard that definition, and all of a sudden I realized that all of these steps that I'm taking every day, this I'm winning every day, is to be celebrated. That's where true happiness comes from. So that's to me, that's a really big monumental moment that stood out. And you know what? It took me almost 11 years of thinking that I had this growth mindset. I mean, I'll be honest with you, most of us are on the spectrum of fixed based on our worldview, the things that we know or we believe to be true. But as soon as you meet somebody who's got a completely different perspective, you go, oh my gosh, why didn't I know that? You know, people were bringing me in as a corporate speaker to talk about, you know, health and happiness and wellness, and I had a completely fixed mindset. I didn't even know it, right? We don't know what we don't know. So one of the biggest moments that also stands out for me is the concept that we can all be learning from each other. So people, you know, they reach out to me and say, Dave, you're a subject matter expert. And I go, no, I'm not. I'm a subject matter enthusiast, because expert implies I know everything. Enthusiast implies that there's lots to be learned and it can always be learning. So I think just the happiness definition and the idea that we're always learning, we can always learn from each other is really, really important. I know that one of the companies that I reached out to not too long ago, large company, they said, oh, Dave, you know, we love what you're doing, but you know what? We already have a growth mindset program in place. We've been doing it for years, so we're good. We don't need to hear what you have to say. And I just thought to myself, yeah, that's a pretty fixed mindset, because you're saying that your perspective is the best perspective and you're unwilling to learn from somebody else. That to me is kind of a fixed perspective point of view. So hopefully that answered that question, Jennifer. So thank you for that. And Stephanie, you've agreed as well that I answered the question, so fantastic. If anybody else has a question that they would like to share, you know, for me, I like to share, just because there's nothing posted else here right now. I want to share a little bit of gratitude, because in my world, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn reaching out to people and writing articles on LinkedIn and waiting for people to comment back. And you know, it's not about the 5,000 connections that I have on LinkedIn in the HR world. It's about how many people that I can actually connect with and make a difference in their lives. And that's why I decided to host this webinar today. I didn't know how many people would show up, so I'm so grateful that the 4 of you did. And what I would really hope is that in my next webinar, that I can answer some more questions that you might have, that you might invite some other like-minded friends to join us. Because just as I talked about that circle of 5, you know, I have spent, you know, I'm 52 now, and I'm healthier and fitter than I was when I was in my 20s. And my kids who are in their 20s now, you know, it's taken me 12 years to change the conversation about food and exercise and mental health. You know, that's a big one, mental health. Why do we get so frustrated and stuck and struggle in our lives? Well, we don't understand finance, we don't understand diet, we don't understand happiness, we don't understand exercise. If we can get those things under control and learn the importance of sleep, all of a sudden you become a better performer at work. All of a sudden opportunities start happening for you, because you're actually taking actionable steps that will improve your life. And when that happens, other things start to fall into place. So, you know, in half an hour, it's really tough to give you that complete overview of what I do. But what I would suggest is, if you would like to have another session like this over a lunch hour, reach out to me by email. You've all got my email. And just let me know what you'd like me to cover next. And I'm happy to run another 30-minute session to help improve your current situation where you are and answer any questions you have. To me, there's nothing more rewarding than reaching out to other people with like minds. So thank you, everybody, for joining. I think that I've got the answers or the questions answered. And yeah, go ahead. And Stephanie's talking about the journal. Listen, one thing about the journal, it might seem intimidating. If it does, reach out to me. I will help walk you through it. I've got lots of videos on my website that talk about how to use the journal, but figuring out the why is your first step. Sorting out your vision is the next step. And then start with small steps. Start with one thing that you can start a winning streak on, and start continuing your winning streak. If it seems like it's really intimidating, you might be biting off more than you can chew to start with. But just, you know, as you start to develop confidence and competence in what you're doing every day, it will grow, and you'll be able to add more and more onto your plate. So everybody, we've reached the end of our 30 minutes today, so I truly do appreciate your time. I appreciate you being here with me. If you want more webinars like this, just reach back to me by email and let me know, and I'm more than happy to invite you into another session. Thanks, everyone. Have an awesome day.